bottom line is the soul needs to grow, to expand, to learn, and to be able to function at the highest possible spiritual level, which brings up, of course, the issue of our going through a rapid change, which is already taking place, and going from one level like the third dimension to the fourth dimension to the fifth dimension. That's a process that this planet is going through right now. Some people are already very well aware of it, working at it. Some people are highly resistant to it. Don't bother me about it. But the fact is that as a planet, we're going through that process.
Welcome to Get Yourself Optimized, a podcast full of secret knowledge that will enable you to reboot and 10x your life. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, author, speaker, online marketer, serial entrepreneur, coach, and a real geek when it comes to biohacking, life hacking, and lifestyle design.
What if the challenges and unresolved issues in your current life originated in a past incarnation? My guest on today's show is reincarnation teacher and past life regressionist Bettye Bender, author of 5 books, including Past Life Regression Guidebook. Bettye has helped nearly 14,000 people explore their past lives through classes and workshops since 1980. With degrees from Barnard College and Columbia University, she has conducted over 3,000 past life regressions to guide students in awakening dormant memories and healing present-day wounds. In this enlightening conversation, Bettye shares her fascinating journey of spontaneously recalling past lives, which catalyzed her career transformation into a prominent expert in the field. She explains how revisiting past life memories can resolve lingering conflicts, improve relationships, and accelerate spiritual growth. Bettye dispels common misconceptions about hypnosis and outlines her unique approach of meditative regression. She also unpacks thought-provoking concepts like karmic debt and the different dimensions of consciousness. Emphasizing the soul's innate desire to evolve, Bettye presents reincarnation as a vital mechanism for learning and growth. She believes that accessing past lives, regardless of the specific methodology, holds immense potential for transformation. By opening the door to our unresolved history, we can catalyze profound healing and spiritual elevation. So without any further ado, on with the show. Bettye, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So first of all, I would love to understand how you got into this interesting business of being a past life regression hypnotherapist. What's the origin story here?
Well, it actually must have been prepared by my guides because it happened spontaneously. I was in the process of changing careers. This was late 70s, early 80s, and I got a message from one of my guides about past life regression, and my first reaction is, what's that? I was then given a few examples, and very promptly felt very comfortable, as though I've done this before. I'll remember. So that's actually how it started. It was a awakening of memories which had gone on in past lives.
So you said that your guides brought these memories forward and they were communicating with you and directing you to take this path in terms of a career. How did you end up understanding that the unseen world is as real or even more real than the seen world, and that these messages that are coming in, just popping into your head or whatever in different ways, are actually from divine and sacred sources?
It felt natural. It felt very familiar when I started hearing messages like this. And I had done meditation, but not seriously about other lifetimes. And the same practices which can be used for past life regression can be used in the present, in the future, or in altered states. I found that out very quickly because as I started experiencing this stuff, I began remembering. It's like having done something years ago, having put it in the closet and not thought about it in a couple of generations, and all of a sudden it pops out again when you open the door. It feels familiar, you know the answers, you know the feelings, and it simply comes back. I like to liken it to riding a bicycle. If you rode a bicycle as a kid, put it in the garage and haven't been on it in a long time and you get on it, doesn't take very long for it to feel familiar and for you to be able to go down the block on your bicycle.
Yeah, but yet we get this spiritual amnesia. We don't remember any of this stuff when we enter a new incarnation. So we're born and we've forgotten our true nature. Why is that?
Not everybody goes through that. There are some people who have spontaneous memories. I was one of them.
Well, some people actually remember a whole set of past lives, like Matthias de Stefano. He's pretty famous. I think he's got his own show on Gaia TV. He's phenomenal. He's very popular on YouTube and so forth, and he remembers a lot of his past lives.
It also applies to abilities, things you've never thought of doing before. Somebody eggs you on and says, "Oh, I'll try it once," and you do it better than the pros. Well, where does that come from? It's a past life memory. It's been squirreled away, but when it comes out into the light of day, you are going to remember it in full detail.
So was there a particular moment in your childhood, perhaps, where you realized, like, hey, I'm seeing stuff or hearing stuff that other people may not be hearing or seeing?
Not exactly. I wouldn't put it in those terms. All I'm saying is that anytime something from another lifetime that I had known before, experienced before, were reviving in some fashion, came to mind, if it felt familiar, if I knew the answers immediately, perhaps without even reading the textbook or getting into a lecture, it had to come from somewhere. So I started wondering, where did it come from? Why did I know that? And the answer was very logical. I mean, if you knew something, for example, as a child, and for 50 years you didn't use that talent, and all of a sudden one day somebody pulls something out of a closet, says, "What's this for?" And you go into a long explanation of what it is and how to use it. Well, it had to come from somewhere.
Right. So in one of your books I read, you wrote about a story of a vision, a memory. You were in a past life and you were Native American, and there were horses and there were other Native Americans on the scene. Can you recall that for our listener and explain the significance of that to you? How important that was for you to see that?
That was a solid example that really got everything started. Up to that point, it was gentle memories in the background or feeling of familiarity, or I could walk into a museum and recognize a tribe or that kind of thing. But when I began to meditate, I began to get messages, some of them verbal and clear, some of them just at a feeling level from my guides. And in the process of experiencing that, what popped up one day was a very clear past life memory of my sitting around a fireplace. And the people who were around me were clearly Native Americans. And I began to feel very comfortable, very familiar with the setting and the people sitting around it. That was how it was triggered. And that's what my guides were encouraging me to experience. Because the more I experienced it, the more real it became, and I wanted to know more. That's how I started to learn about past lives. And these things get timed in real time. There was a course that was opening up a couple of weeks after I had these experiences. And the person who was teaching it turned out to be someone I had known in a past life. That's not unusual. And she was a teacher again in this lifetime. She picked up on the fact that I had been getting memories of this in the lifetime. And she asked me about it, and I hadn't told anybody about it. This was brand new. So I thought this was an opportunity for me to take her course, and within a few days of that, she announced that she was teaching an advanced course on how to do these regressions, these meditations, with other people to help them awaken their memories. And I immediately signed up. Now, remember, I had just started her course about 3 or 4 days earlier, but the two of them blended together perfectly well. And she wasn't surprised I was interested in both. I had a nice long talk with her privately after class one day, and she told me some things that I already knew and that she had guessed I would stumble into eventually. And it was only a matter of days before I made that connection. So I had signed up with her because I wanted to learn more about meditation. And very quickly, I moved from that point of view to wanting to remember in depth certain past lives, and that Indian past life was one of them.
But you got confirmation that helped maybe the skeptics or the doubters see that you weren't just making this up or you weren't just imagining it. There was a particular tribe that you somehow got connected with or knew that it was your tribe, and you went and did some research. It's vague. I remember something about this in the book, but when I read it, it's like, wow, that's really cool to get that confirmation, get actual evidence in the library that you weren't imagining this stuff. This was real.
Well, I certainly had been a researcher in this lifetime. And the idea of reading about this and actually going to the library and finding books on the subject was very exciting to me. That's how I ran into the information about that tribe. And as I read it, one of the amusing things that happened was I turned the page, and all of a sudden there was a full page, full color picture of a horse. And I said, "That's my horse." Remember, I was in the library when that happened, and I said it out loud, and then I kind of turned to one side or the other because I didn't want to disturb other people in the library. One person heard it and smiled and went back to reading his book. But that's how the confirmation of the researcher backed up the experiential, and the two of them fit perfectly together. I find that happens a lot with people who are willing to extend beyond the first memories. An example is if you run into somebody in this lifetime who feels like they've been a family member, even though you just met them, chances are that's a past life family member that you just ran into, and there's a reason why you just met them again. There's something to resolve, or there's something to learn, or maybe there was a close love relationship, but there are reasons for this. And as the left brain becomes satisfied that you get that kind of information backing up the experiential of the right brain, that's when things become very real. And there's an acceleration in the process of moving into the field of meditation about not only past lives, but in this lifetime as well.
Yeah. And one thing you wrote in one of your books that I really liked is these warring generals who fight each other to the death end up reincarnating as siblings, and then they work their differences out over cornflakes in the morning. I love that analogy.
A lot of people get a real kick out of that. And I remember saying that in front of a group when I was teaching a class, and the group just laughed their heads off. They really related to the idea. So I put it into the book that I was writing. And it's literally true, where there's a past life connection you're not aware of consciously, but it's right under the surface. And you know it. That's why the person feels familiar. Whatever your feelings have been, whatever your attitudes, whatever your differences from another lifetime, they're going to surface. And it's an opportunity, one, to resolve, and two, to get to know them again. It's like running into somebody you knew in childhood. Now they're adults, and you have a different kind of relationship, but it's a close relationship nevertheless. That happens a lot.
Yeah, so this is a way to help with resolving the unresolved issues that just kind of spill over into this lifetime from previous lifetimes, and you get this additional insight information from a past life regression hypnosis session that gives you some peace or some clarity about how to deal with a particularly difficult person in your life. It's like, oh, now this makes so much more sense. I can approach this with fresh eyes and more open heart rather than be so reactive to them like I was before.
Right. And I've often said that Earth is a large school. A lot of individuals have incarnated on this planet in order to do what you just outlined. And as we run into one another again, we may start where we had something unresolved in another lifetime and it's an opportunity to resolve it. Then we can go on to the next step, which is to get to know them better at a deeper level, at a more philosophical level. And as we do that, they become friends. If there is a difference, we can resolve it. I've seen that again and again and again. The most common issue I've ever worked on in all the thousands of regressions I have done is that Earth is a school. It's an opportunity to resolve things we haven't resolved before, to learn things we haven't learned before. And that's why we signed up to incarnate on this planet in the first place.
And yet there are people who will say, I'm not interested in dredging up my past, especially if it's other lifetimes. That's not relevant. I'm in the here and the now. I don't care about that stuff. That's not helpful. That's a distraction. And what do you tell a person? How do you respond to somebody who has that belief?
Well, try saying that to a person who is a counselor or a therapist. They'll laugh because the issues you've raised are very current, or they wouldn't be hitting you between the eyes now. Something is unresolved, regardless of where it came from. It could be from childhood in this lifetime. It could be from another lifetime. It doesn't matter where it came from. The point is, if you have something to learn, something to resolve, it's like going to class, you open the textbook and you read the book. It's rather like that. That's what we're incarnating to do, to improve who we are, how we function, how we get along with other people, and therefore improve life in the present and the future.
Yeah. A couple of quotes that I love that relate to this is one, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it.
Right.
And then my favorite Mark Twain quote, history doesn't repeat itself, but sometimes it rhymes.
Yes, he had a lovely sense of humor. The point is that we're in a learning process. And learning comes in many forms. You don't have to sit in a classroom to do it. If you do, that's helpful. Most of our learning actually occurs in interrelationships, which allow us to see in ourselves or another person something that we need to resolve or learn. And so it's an opportunity. Why not take that opportunity, run with it, and have a better life as a result?
Yeah, for sure. Now, some of the closest family members and perhaps our spouse, soulmate are their soul contracts, and we're here to work things out and make each other better and help each other grow. So if you believe that, let's say, a mother and a child chose each other prior to incarnating, which I do believe, then I'm curious, do you believe that too?
Yeah, I do. And it's interesting to see the examples that have popped up in the process of my doing regressions with people. The fact of the matter is, when we trade places with somebody, let's say mother this lifetime was child prior lifetime. The fact is, the behaviors, the beliefs, the shadow issues are going to hit us between the eyes. And it's going to feel very familiar. Oh, yeah, that's something I really need to clean up. The fact is, that process is not confined to a very narrow piece of time in any given lifetime. It's an issue that's come up in many forms, in many opportunities to resolve it. Maybe we have done a little bit before, but not completely. It's an opportunity to completely resolve it this time.
Yeah. So I'm curious with regards to your relationship with your mom. I know that from your books, you wrote about your mom being in a coma towards the end, and there was some sort of meaningful experience that you had that you included in the book about this. Do you want to share anything about that?
Yeah, my mother and I were very close during the years that I was growing up and during my early adult years, where she encouraged me to go in any direction I felt I wanted to go. And the result of that was that she was very supportive when I started doing regression work, even though it was not part of her experience. She was excited that I'd found a niche. And the result of that was it encouraged me to ask people when they came into group or individual sessions, if there were any individuals in their families that they were close to, as well as individuals they may have had differences with, because it's not unusual that two souls will recognize one another from another time and not necessarily know when and where and who they were. But it'll be comfortable for them because there's an acceptance that all of this is part of our personal growth process. And that's what my mother was doing with me for many years.
If someone is trying to resolve something with a family member or some other loved one, from a practical standpoint, what do you recommend they do to work in past life regression into their process of resolution and healing?
First of all, notice the things that where you agree with one another, where you're comfortable, and the things where you're not comfortable, things that are unresolved. Those are two little checklists. It helps if you've done any kind of psychotherapy. You'll know what those issues are pretty quickly. But even if you haven't, you'll be able to think about where you're comfortable with a family member, what you're comfortable talking about, where you're not comfortable with a family member, and don't want to tell them anything about whatever it is you're learning. Those are the kinds of issues that start us off in both contexts, both of psychotherapy and in meditation. When we identify them and we can take it apart, like, having a piece of bread and chopping it into little pieces, what you'll notice is where there's a comfort zone, it's something we've resolved or something we felt comfortable with. That individual in another setting, in another time and place. Where there is friction, disagreement, arguments, etc., that's something that needs to be resolved probably on both sides. May not be the same issue for both of them. But it comes together in a way that both of them need to work on it. One may decide to do so and the other doesn't want to be bothered. That's their choice. In the process of doing that, you'll notice you feel more comfortable with yourself. You feel prouder of yourself and what you've accomplished. You'll also feel sadness about loss. Don't bury that. Allow yourself to go through it because that's an unresolved tear. And it's also likely that it will open other doors you may not have expected. When I first was introduced by Loy Young a long time ago to the concept of past life regression, and she recognized me, I felt she was familiar, but she knew what past life we had shared together. When that begins to surface, it's not unusual. It affects career change. It certainly did in my case. When I started doing this stuff, I never thought I was going to spend 30 years doing meditative regressions with hundreds and hundreds of people, both in group settings and individually in counseling. And yet that's exactly what I did. So don't say no. Allow the process to work. Where you feel stuck, get help. If you're a person who wants to see a therapist first, fine. If you want to go directly for meditation, fine, whatever works for you. You want to do both, that's great. Allow yourself to grow and expand and have those experiences. They're all part of your growth, all part of your becoming a more complete person. And it's actually fun when you get to that state.
Yeah, this is all to make yourself better and refine your soul. So I'm looking at the Past Life Regression Guidebook right now, and on page 101, there's this acid test you walk people through on 2 columns. One column is characteristics I want to let go of or change. And then on the other column is opposites or characteristics I would rather have. And then there's another test, the 50% test, where you look at people like your mom and your dad, and you see if they're more like the attributes on the left column or on the right column, 50% or more on one column versus the other, then they're more like that. And then you see where the key people in your life end up having a lot of the attributes, the negative attributes, especially that you don't like in yourself, come from your parents and siblings and other key figures in your life. And of course, it rubs off when you have people who are role models in your early childhood, and then they end up wiping that baggage all over you. And then you carry that through your life. So this helps to kind of unpack that. And then you can go even deeper by using past life regression.
It's a tool. It's an extremely helpful tool. And I have found that the people who work that in with everything else they do, whatever their improvement process is, the fact is the more you have access to different ways of growing, the better you're going to feel about yourself, the more you're going to function in society, the more people are going to be able to look up to you and see, you've done it, I can do it too.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the phrase meditative regression. So is that different from hypnotic regression or regression hypnosis? Because some people will say that I'm not good at getting hypnotized. Nobody can hypnotize me. So they kind of shut the door to the process of being able to access past life memories through hypnosis.
There are different methodologies. The one that we are probably most familiar with has to do with hypnosis. The work I've done is on a different track. I mean, it has similar results, but it's a little less clinical. The people who do hypnosis can help reprogram. My intention was to help people find who they are and what they are comfortable with. Now, if a person says, I can't be regressed, or I can't go to a hypnotist because it doesn't work, if that's your experience or that's your feeling, that's fine. The reality is you don't have to go into a deep altered state. I have many times, but not everybody does. One of the things I've noticed is that some people at a surface level, if people don't put tags, don't put names on methods, will come up with answers without having to sweat it. That there's a natural intuitive process that goes on in their minds that brings them answers without their having to work hard at it. And you don't have to use a structured methodology if it doesn't feel right for you. If you're a kind of person, for example, who could sit down on a shore of a stream and not fall asleep necessarily, but go into a very dreamy, relaxed state, believe it or not, you're meditating. You've automatically dropped into a meditative state without having to sweat it. People who do that don't have to be programmed. Don't have to have somebody say, okay, now this is what we're going to do next. It just comes to them. Everybody is different as to how they get answers and how they experience stuff. So when I'm working with somebody, I may ask some questions about what have you experienced before, how do you feel about, that kind of thing. If it's something they want to shut the door on, fine with me. I'm not going to force them to open a door they don't want to open. But if they're comfortable with the process, if they feel it's truly coming from within them, within their psyche, go with it. It's working.
Yep. For sure. Okay. So I am curious to hear what your definitions are of a few different terms that are labels for different things. So we talked about the label of hypnosis, and if you have certain beliefs about that label, then you create your own reality around it, even if it's not helpful to you to do so. So there's some other labels I want to get your take on, like karmic debt, chakras, astral projection, thought forms. So let's just start with karmic debt. Just unpack that a little bit for our listener.
Okay, the concept of karma I refer to as a learning lesson. It's like signing up for courses at college, A, B, C, and D. Okay. Everybody who goes through that process has made some sort of internal decision, consciously or unconsciously. There's something they got to learn, something they got to resolve, something that's been nagging at them, and they really need to break that open and understand why it bothers them. Each person has his or her own needs and brings his or her own memories and unresolved issues into another lifetime. And when you get to a point where something is resolved, you don't have to go back to it. It's like being in school. I took that course. I passed it. I want to go to something else. In the process of doing meditation, which is my definition of regression, the methodologies may be different in different schools or in different approaches. But the point is, you're going into a relaxed state in which the subconscious mind begins to offer you information at a conscious level that you either have suppressed or been unaware of. But when it comes up, it intrigues you or makes you angry or makes you upset, and you want to find out about it. What is this? Why did I react that way? It's like any other learning process. The more you experience, the more you open the door instead of shut it, the more you learn. That's what learning's all about. You open the book, you read it. Okay, let me come back to that paragraph later. Put the book aside, come back that evening. Oh, now I understand that. I got it. It's a process like that. To me, that's what meditation's about. There are different forms by which you can get that experience, different structures, different results. But the bottom line is the soul needs to grow, to expand, to learn, and to be able to function at the highest possible spiritual level, which brings up, of course, the issue of our going through a rapid change, which is already taking place, and going from one level like the third dimension to the fourth dimension to the fifth dimension. That's the process that this planet is going through right now. Some people are already very well aware of it, working at it. Some people are highly resistant to it. Don't bother me about it. But the fact is that as a planet, we're going through that process. There are people who are hanging on to the third dimension at the lower level, or even the fourth at the lower level, for dear life. They're not going to give up on it. Okay, that's where they are. Maybe they'll come back and learn it at a later time. They're not going to take the course this time around. There are other people who can't wait to make the jump from one to the other, who can't wait to be maybe back in the fifth dimension that they've been in before, and they came down to the third to do certain things to improve life on Earth. Everybody has different agendas. My point is the process, the structure by which we do it, may take different forms for different people from different backgrounds, but it's very similar if you look at it from a broad standpoint. We're all in it to grow, to elevate, to go to a higher level. People do it faster than others. Some people are resistant to it. But that's the process that the soul is intending to go through.
Yeah, that's a very positive way to look at it, much better than the commonly negative connotation of karmic debt being that you were the creditor in one lifetime and you ruined somebody because they couldn't pay you back, and now you're the debtor in this lifetime so you can feel what it feels like and get the brunt of the punishment that you were doling out in a previous lifetime. This isn't about punishment. This is about learning and growing. This is about spiritual refinement.
From the standpoint of the soul, which is what I was presenting, correct. If there are individuals who have a lot of resistance and do not want to learn thank you, do not want to change the way they do things, want to be in control, want to make sure that everybody agrees with them. I mean, if that's where they are, they've got a long way to go, but God bless them, they'll get there eventually. The soul is a beautiful thing. It's really the essence of who we are. We don't have a soul, we are a soul. And I've said that many, many times throughout my career. We are souls who've chosen to take on these experiences in order to grow, in order to learn, in order to elevate through the dimensions. And that's the most positive way of looking at it. But those people who are resistant, or those people who had a terrible experience that are still wrapped up in it, well, that's where they are. They may take longer to be able to get out of it.
All right. So I know we're out of time here, but I wanted to make sure that our listener knows that they could work with you. They can hire you for past life regression, and that is phone-based. So you could be anywhere in the world, and you have a really amazing special offer for our listener, which is $100 rate for a 2-hour session.
Right.
Which is amazing. I mean, that's that's like 1980s pricing, I think. So,
well, it is truly. I want people to start experiencing what it feels like to grow, to resolve issues, and to feel good about themselves and their relationship with other people. So I want to encourage that.
Yeah. And if somebody is open to therapy, this is just another form of therapy. And you don't have to regress somebody in a session. If they feel comfortable to do that, then by all means. But even just getting some therapy from you for a session for $100, I think is a great deal. So I just want to make sure that our listener understands the kind of value that you're offering here is amazing. And
thank you.
The many thousands of sessions that you have done, like you are so incredibly experienced at this and an author and renowned expert in this field. I just think that's an incredible offer.
Let me just thank you. And let me just add, California law is very specific. I cannot call myself a therapist unless I've gone through their process.
Got it.
So I talk to myself as a teacher, whether I'm working with one person, one-on-one, or a group of people on the phone, in person, in an auditorium, wherever I am. I'm a teacher and I'm helping you grow.
So if our listener wants to work with you, the best way that they can get a hold of you is through email, right? Which is Bettye, Bettye, Bender, @email.com.
Now let me give you both my phone number and my email. I'll repeat the email because it's an unusual spelling for my name and people sometimes get confused. The email address is Bettye Bender, Bettye, B like in boy, INBER, Bettye Bender @email.com. And they can also call me if they wish to do that. And I'm going to give the phone number, so write it down because I don't often do this in a public way. 951-658-5794.
So thank you, Bettye. This was really awesome and inspiring, and you clearly have an incredible depth and wealth of information and experience in this field of past life regression. Thank you for all the work that you do and have done over the decades to help people, in this episode to help our listeners. So thank you so much.
You're most welcome, and I look forward to hearing from people. I would love to help you.
Awesome. And thank you, listener. Go out there and make it a great day. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off. If you want to hear more conversations like this on accessing past life lessons, then I recommend episode 328 with Dr. Jim Tucker, episode 398 with Dr. Eben Alexander, and episode 400 with Rabbi Chaim Miller. Also, I invite you to check out the show notes, transcript, action-based checklist, and all the URLs mentioned in this interview with Bettye Bender at getyourselfoptimized.com/467.
Thanks for listening to Get Yourself Optimized. Nearly a decade ago, I started a journey that completely transformed my personal life and my business. Now I'm taking on a very select number of high-caliber coaching clients and personally helping them optimize their lives. I have limited spots, so if you're interested, go now to getyourselfoptimized.com and apply for one-on-one coaching or for our high-level mastermind. By the way, if you have any questions or comments whatsoever, email me at host@getyourselfoptimized.com. See you next week.